Welcome to the Startup Grind.
First,
rapid beatbox?
I think so. Yeah, I'm not arm wrestling, dude. I know that. There'll be no CrossFit challenges tonight. But I am going to crush you with my sock game. So I will take you on. I will take you on.
Dude, white is retro in the way you should.
Is that the way? Okay.
Yeah.
I know.
Just so you know,
I'm going skull and bones. Okay, so for those of you who have not attended a Startup Grind before, welcome. For those of you who have, this one's going to be way better than any that you've attended before. So we'll just set the stage there. This is going to be fun. Michael is a man about town, and just throw it out there. It's like a godfather of San Antonio's emerging tech startup scene, and many other scenes as well, which is kind of cool. You know, oftentimes one guy gives the intro to the other guy, but the other person knows way less than the person themselves. So I'm going to ask you, if you would, Michael, first. The first question I actually want to ask you is, why are you in San Antonio?
Why am I in San Antonio?
Yes.
That's a good question. So my family and roots are all here now.
Good.
And it would be really hard to leave. So I don't really have a choice. So it doesn't mean I don't like it. Like it's actually, I think like 5 years ago, if you'd asked me like, am I a promoter of San Antonio, I would have been like, yeah, it's great. And I would have said it with that level of inflection. But like with the changes that have happened in the past 18 months, like people ask me and I'm like, yeah, it's awesome. Like you gotta get to San Antonio because, well, things have really changed in some pretty awesome ways, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so
I wouldn't want to be in any place other than here right now. 5 years ago, I don't know if I'd have said that. But what brought me back was family and family business stuff.
Family and family business. Okay, so give us, that's a very nice segue into what were those family businesses, or you know, what are they? Maybe a quick little blurb about your background. When you left, where did you go?
Sure.
And yeah.
Yeah, so my family has been in the fireworks business, so like backyard fireworks for 5 generations now, since the 20s. So like my great-great-uncle used to like walk around with like a basket and sell them door to door in Sherman, Texas. And so my family had done that forever and ever. So my dad did, that's what we talked about around like the kitchen table. So I knew more about that business than I guess most anything else growing up. I went to Almike High School here, grew up in Olmsted Park, so very fortunate to have a really, I think, gifted childhood. That's the best I can say about it. I could not wait to get out of San Antonio as an 18-year-old, so I remember looking at a book. At the time, you had to look on a book. You couldn't look on the internet to pick colleges. Does anybody remember that? Okay, so you would go and you would buy like at Borders, which was a company then. You would go buy this book that was like this big, and I went through every single page. It was like 1,200 pages, and I marked all the schools that I could go to that had a computer science program, because I love the program, and that had a swimming team that I thought I could be on, and had a fraternity system. At the time, I thought being in a frat would be like the coolest thing ever. And so anyway, lots of learning from that. So I went and I picked all these schools, and they were all like really far away, like California, Pennsylvania. I picked one in Minnesota, like rural Minnesota. I didn't actually visit that one, so I didn't go there. It's called McAllister College. I mean, I'm sure it's nice, but not for me. And I went to go visit a school called Lafayette in Pennsylvania, and I went and stayed with this group of guys. One of whom was in a frat, and the other dude was like 7'2". Like, there was this huge, weird 7'2" guy. But I remember playing like ping pong with them in their room, like in this dorm, and I had just a great time. I didn't go visit any other school except for A&M. And I decided not to go to A&M for obvious reasons. What? So I went up there, got a computer science degree, and then after college, decided to move to San Francisco. And I said if I was going to be in the tech industry, I wanted to go where it all happened. So if I was going to be in finance, I would move to Wall Street, and if I was going to be in tech, I wanted to move to where it was. And so when I moved out there, actually all the tech was still down in Silicon Valley, was down south. Right? You guys familiar with the geography of Silicon Valley? So like you have San Francisco up on this peninsula, and then San Jose, and in between is Mountain View and Palo Alto and Stanford and all those places where like the tech was at the time. So I was actually one of the few people that was in San Francisco commuting down to San Mateo, and I worked for a company called RSA. That was my first job out of college, and it was a cryptography company. And my job was to sit there and kind of like what people do at Rackspace today, my job was to sit there and talk to them on the phone and help them get their little cryptography applications working. So I ended up doing that for a couple years, and I realized very quickly that I was never going to be a gifted programmer. So I think that's like one of the interesting things in life is everyone has to figure out what is the thing that is your genius, right? What is the thing that we can all say, I'm going to be the best in the world at this. I'm going to be world class at this thing. And I realized I was never going to be that as a programmer. Like I talked to the other people, and there's some of them in this room, and they were all going to be orders of magnitude better than me. But I did realize that marketing and thinking about business and thinking strategically and connecting with people was hopefully something I could do a lot better. So I migrated my way into marketing, eventually went to work for another 3-letter company called BEA, and that was in San Francisco, and that was fantastic because I got rid of my car. That was like that was the highlight of my San Francisco existence. And I didn't actually get rid of the car because I wanted to. I got rid of the car because I didn't drive it for 2 months and it stopped working. So it actually seized up. Like you couldn't when they came to tow it, like it was all seized up, so you couldn't actually pick it up. They had a very special tow truck because I donated it. So that was pretty awesome. And I lived in this great house with a roommate who was a fantastic engineer. And the fun part about that house is a 3-bedroom house. Before we moved in, like it was this nice white and blue color. It was out just by the Haight area of San Francisco. It was fantastic. Well, between the time we rented it for, by the way, $3,000 a month in 1998, $3,000 a month for a 3-bedroom house. It was so expensive. I couldn't believe we were paying that much money. Now it's probably a $10,000 a month house in San Francisco. But between the time we rented it and the time we showed up, the landlord decided to paint it hot pink and spearmint green. It was like the juicy fruit house. Like it was fantastic. But it actually gave us a really great chance to have tons of cool parties, and they were all pink themed. It was like, you're coming to my house, you're wearing pink. It was fantastic. So eventually I met my lovely wife who was in the back. Wave your hand. And we decided, she's like endothermic, she doesn't like cold weather even though she's from Ohio. And we decided that we were sick of the Bay Area, so we went and traveled for a year. And then my dad said, I want to retire, come back to San Antonio, run this fireworks company. And I said, that sounds entirely different than what I've been doing. And so I signed up for that and did that for a decade until I got so sick that I couldn't take it anymore. And then my brother runs that. So he's not here, so I will tell him he's a total sucker. No, it's right for him at this stage in life. My brother is I kind of divide the world of business people into hunters and farmers. My brother loves the optimization of things. Like that's what a farmer does. Hunters love to go out and like create new things and like go find that elk and like shoot it in the head. Right? That's what I enjoy doing. And so like the prospect of taking a business and just keeping it formed, right, is not that much fun to me. So anyway, that's a long story short.
Okay, well, so, in your DNA then, this kind of, so we've got a 116-year-old family manufacturing business at my family, and I knew when I was getting ready to graduate from college, I decided like what job I wasn't gonna have, and that was to go back and work for our family company, and then I realized, and it kind of freaked me out that I hadn't decided what I was going to do. So, from fireworks to computer programming, was part of it like, I'm gonna do something totally different, or what was it that drew you? Did you have, some clarity that, hey, computers are the way of the future, and I've been, I've seen this family business that's been operating with technology that's hundreds of years old, or like, what was it that drove you initially to pursue programming and computers?
Yeah, so, when we were 9, my parents bought an Apple IIe, which, by the way, buying a computer in 1982, do you guys know how expensive those things were in today's dollars? Like, it was like a small car is what people were paying for. So, I remember seeing the receipt. My parents spent $3,000 in 1982. Like, that's like 10 grand now. So that's what I say, like, I've had a very gifted upbringing. Like, it was amazing. But it exposed me to a world having like an Apple IIe, like, that most people didn't get that benefit. Like, it was a real gift. But I just liked it from the beginning. They had pictures of me just on it all the time, just spending time playing with it. Including one time when I was 9, and for some reason I decided to put a whole popsicle in the disk drive. My parents had to spend like $500 fixing it. And I did all like the teenage mistakes or preteen mistakes. Like at one point I ran up like a $600 bill on CompuServe. So for those of you who don't know, CompuServe is
sound. Would you make it down?
yeah, CompuServe is like AOL, but before that, and less CDs in the mail, basically. But they charged you by the minute, so like it was fascinating at the time. But yeah, so I don't personally find joy in fireworks. I think that's important when you think about what business or what you want to do. Like, I don't enjoy playing with fireworks. I don't enjoy shooting them. I don't enjoy talking about them. I don't enjoy the chemistry of them. I don't enjoy going to China to buy them. It is work, right? But computers, on the other hand, like, Like I was telling one of the staff today at Codeup, I was like, you know what, if being an IT like help desk person paid better, I would totally consider it. Like some of the best joy I get at our company is maintaining our internet. Like it's actually a lot of fun. Like digging with the nuance of that, like optimizing it, breaking it, like the stress of that. Like I really enjoy that. It's a lot of fun. But anyway, so like I think it's important. Like you got to find something that gives you joy, and if you're lucky, you can find a way to make a living out of that.
Right. Well, and even so, within the context of a company, you know, you don't start. Maybe put it this way: you start a company to solve a problem. Like the company's the byproduct of the solving for the solution. But then you find if you're successful, which hopefully the entrepreneur is, that you end up, you know, having to be a manager and having to deal with these things that you don't want to do. And so, how have you kind of found your way through that? You know, how do you manage that maze for yourself? So balancing the activities that you find really engaging and you know you're an expert at, and then balancing the activities that you have to do just because you're the boss and the buck stops with you.
Yeah. Well, to be clear, like I really find a lot of pleasure out of, you know, I think that the CEO of a company or the business founder of a company is doing three things. One, they're in charge of marketing, sales and marketing, like making sure money and the right amount of awareness is coming through the door, right? Number two, they're setting the overall strategic direction for the company. Like where should we go and being a leader in that way. But number three, and the thing and all those things I find a lot of joy in. Number three is like finding good people and motivating them and having them in a really inspired position for them. And that's actually, I think we as a younger group of people, us millennials, so to speak, and I know I'm 40, so I don't really count, but you know, this idea of the generations before us, like I'm in a CEO group with a lot of them, and they're 56 years old, and I use language to talk about the way we all look at careers now, and those people don't really think about it the way we do. They think about it in the more like the old style of where it was like, hey, you're gonna come work for IBM and you're gonna join the mafia and like you're in it for life, right? And you're expected to always be here. And the world has changed from that. Like I think everybody in this room, including myself, is gonna have 8 or 10 different jobs. And that's perfectly normal, and companies have to accept that. But anyway, so like the reason I say this and the reason I think about this is because I wanted to like show like I actually really find joy in thinking about this stuff, right? Like I find joy in how do I best support and empower the team members. And you know, I sent an email to the Codeup co-founders. I was like, check this out. Like this is awesome. And it was a welcome packet that the staff had prepared for new students. And it was one of those times in which the staff did something better than me and the other co-founders could ever imagine doing. Like, and that was like one of my happiest moments. I was like, check this out. We did nothing and it's better than we ever could. Like, that is so cool to me, right? And the prospect of that team building and motivating people, and like our Codeup turnover has been remarkably low. We've lost 2 employees out of over 2.5 years. Like I'm really proud of that. Now this is like, we're gonna lose 5 tomorrow. But like that is like, that's.
Have you picked them yet? Do they know this?
We're in the audience. Figure out who you are. But like that's really, really fun. So I super enjoy business. I don't like fireworks. Right? Does that make sense? So I love tech, I love business, I like being with smart people. Like that's great.
Nice.
That's fantastic.
Well, so there is a parallel, of course, to launching. I'll use the launch metaphor, right? But so you've picked an industry, both sort of on the tech side and then the Codeup, where you are, you know, getting folks, you know, ready to go out and explore their careers. And then the Geekdom Fund, I'll make a quick sort of hop over to some of the outside investment that you do in other companies, which is about helping other people kind of launch and establish. So I mean, clearly there's a thread there for you, and you've been able to position yourself so that you can, as you said, inspire other folks and then actually monetize other people's ideas. You know, how do you view those things? Maybe I'll ask the question this way. What is it about those 2 activities that, you know, really engages you and turns you on? Like which part of the mentoring or the funding or the helping people achieve their ideas, like what is it about that process that you find the most engaging? And then maybe talk a little bit about Geekdom Fund and some of the other activities that you're involved in.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think there's multiple types of businesses and activities to be in, right? So there are some businesses, and the fireworks business is one of these, where being better is not necessarily being better or smarter or working harder than the next guy doesn't necessarily turn into rewards for you. Because being like a farmer in the fireworks business, you guys know what happens if it doesn't rain in the fireworks business? There's droughts and then they ban fireworks. It kind of sucks. Like you work 6 months and then nobody pays you anything. So it's kind of in that way, it's hard. But I think, the whole, what really turns me on is, I think, 2 things. One is working with people that are really fun to be around and intellectually stimulating and positive. And I think, I feel like if you look at either one of those ventures, those are teams that we built. As teams, we built teams that are people who are incredibly happy and positive and driven and mission oriented. And we have people coming to Codeup because the vision of what we're doing and the changing people's lives that we do every day, people are happy to come to work there. And I think that's the common thread amongst those things is, I'm getting to do the day-to-day activities that are really fun to me, ideating, strategizing, coaching people, talking about things, having friendly collegial arguments, all those things are the things I get to do. But at the same time, you're doing those with people that are the people you want to be with. So, funny anecdote about Codeup is one of our attorneys is my friend. He's like, oh man, another email from Codeup. It's gonna be smiley faces and exclamation points. I can't believe this. And he's a grouchy old, 50-year-old lawyer, from San Antonio. So he's like, I don't know how to deal with these millennials. But I'm like, it's happy over here. It's a happy place. It's like Howard Elementary. It's where my kid goes to preschool, and their brand is we're the happiest place on earth. And so, I kind of feel like it's a happy place. So. But I think that's the coolest thing about being an entrepreneur. Everybody talks about all this different stuff. But having the power to choose who you work with and what you work on, is the greatest gift you can give yourself professionally. Because ultimately, we're all gonna die. We don't take it with us. And if you have the opportunity to say, I got to spend time with Ben, right, and Hannah and Jenny and all these people, and I get to sit in the same office with them, that's a real, that's an awesome thing. And I told the Geekdom Fund partners, we met yesterday, and I was like, I got to say something before we start the meeting. And there's 4 of us, me, Cole, Don, and Mike. And I said, I got to say something before we start the meeting. This is the meeting I look forward to most, every week. I enjoy this meeting more than anything because everybody's happy, everybody's mission driven, and the economics of the Geekdom Fund are such that nobody's getting rich on our fund, right? It's just not happening. Hopefully our investors are, but we're not. But it's a model where we're doing it as a labor of love because hanging out with those guys is just it's totally awesome, totally fun. Everybody's smiling, happy. I think that's the most important thing in the whole thing.
Dig into it just for a minute, if you would, for everybody's benefit. So the Geekdom Fund has, it's certainly been evolving since its inception, and so just kind of, give us a quick primer on what it is doing now and what's the range of investments that you're looking for, and even geography, which has been expanding.
Yeah. So back when Geekdom first started in 2013, or 2012, whenever Geekdom first started, a bunch of the Rackspace founders got together and said, hey, what we're going to do is we want to grow startups and fund some of them inside of Geekdom. So we're going to create this fund. And that was the original Geekdom Fund. And the model was those guys put up the money, and then a group of Geekdom members would get together and be the board to decide whether you got investment or not. And the way that worked was you either got the $25,000 at these terms or you didn't. That was the deal. So it's kind of half charity, half venture investing. And a few of the companies have gone on to do really well, but it kind of showed that some of them were charity, right? So this is enabling people like Par Level, for example, who's turned out to be a real big success story to get started. And that was originally 2 kids, right? And I mean kids at the time, they've grown up. But 2 recent graduates from Trinity and UTSA that wanted to go do that stuff. So me, Don, Cole, Mike, Troy, we were all people that were on that volunteer board. So we gave our time because we cared about the community. Plus, I thought it was a lot of fun. You just sit there and talk to people about their ideas and ask them tough questions. That's a lot of fun. So eventually, the money behind that and the interest in continuing that, everybody felt like it had just done its job. We had sparked a number of companies. It was an order of magnitude still smaller than what you see in Geekdom now, which, by the way, for those of you that are just new to the community, every time I walk over to Geekdom, I'm like, holy S word. I can't believe, I promised everybody I wasn't going to curse that much, so but that is amazing. I walked, Chantal and I, my wife, we went in and she's like, I want to see a tour of their space. I was like, let me take you over. And normally I used to be able to walk through and be like, this company does this company does this company does that. And now I'm like, I have no idea what these people do, never heard of this name, no idea. It's gotten to the point where, the community has grown so much that I don't know what everything is. And like everybody's easy to pick on the negatives of like the community a lot, like, oh, there's no VC here, blah, 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 but like, it is awesome up there. Like, there was no startup community here 3 years ago. Like, it just blows me away. So, what we saw when the old fund wound down is, man, there are all these companies like Promoter, Par Level, they're gonna need to raise money based on the characteristics of their business, and we're the right guys to go do it. So we met with Pat Condon, one of the Rackspace founders, Lorenzo, and me and Cole. And Cole, who knows Cole? Do you guys know Cole? Okay. That guy was here before I am, like, fantastic guy. If you haven't met Cole Wallach, you need to go find him and buy him coffee or something. Like, he is precisely the story that Geekdom, is supposed to be. A young guy, recent Trinity graduate, could have gone anywhere in the world, but because of what Geekdom is, like, stay here, right? And is really growing the community and cares a lot. He's just wise beyond his years. So anyway, we got together and said, let's go raise a fund that will invest in these startups. We think we can do well at it. And that's how stuff started. So the general strategy to put together that fund was we assembled a great team. Here's a little secret of how teams get put together or VC investments get made, rule number 0. So for those of you writing notes, this is the first thing you can write down.
Or hashtag.
Yeah. Like, the number one thing, like people ask, what's your number one thing as you look for investments? I was like, the team has to be somebody you want to spend time with. Like, you wouldn't be shocked at how many like venture investments we meet, how many potential employees like I meet, and I'm like, I have no interest in spending time with this person. This person is not a positive, a optimistic person. And you see it in startup founders. You're like, man, I could not see myself wanting to spend 10 hours a week for the next 20 years with this guy. Like, just not interested. So we assembled this great team. Don Douglas, who owns the CityNet building, longtime entrepreneur, Mike Troy, who works with Cole at FlashCam 3D, and then we just went out and tried to sell some people on doing the fund. And we just went like any other entrepreneurs did. We put together a pitch deck. We went and found some people we thought would be very likely customers, and we pitched them. And then we said, "Can we tell other people that you're a customer?" Yes. Okay. And then we went and told other people, and after about 9 months, the worst months of my life, we fund $3.5 million from a bit over 50 people. So you can just do the math in your head. Okay, so your typical investor takes 2 meetings, and you're probably going to pitch 3 people for every one that invests, or every 2 for every one that invests. That is a lot of lattes. A lot of lattes. So we did it, and then the fun part about it is when we closed the fund, we had a bunch of people coming and saying, "Oh, we want it." So that, sorry, you got to wait for the next slide. The velvet rope is up. And it's been going great. The goal was to target between 25 to 30 startup investments. About 40% of the money has stayed here in San Antonio. A lot of the rest of the money has San Antonio connections. And then we're just, the cool part of it is just part of us building community. Like, we have startups come to San Antonio to pitch us. We're just like, oh, you want to pitch us? You want some money? You gotta go to San Antonio. And so we have Austin startups that are driving down here all the time. And it's actually really cool. And yeah, it's just been a lot of fun, right? And it's really, it all comes down to that, can you work with people you want to spend a lot of time with? And if you do that, like, there's a good chance it's going to be okay.
Are the current investments that you want to give a shout out to people in the fund?
We love all of our children.
Of course.
So I'll give a shout out to our entire portfolio. No, I mean, you look at some of the triumphs here in San Antonio. I think Par Level is amazing. Like, those guys, I won't quote you the number of people they have, because every time I ask them, they're like, oh, we have 10 more people. Like, there's 50-something up there, and they're overflowing with space. I think Promoter is doing fantastic stuff with what their business is. So, all really good stuff happening in San Antonio. Merge guys as well. It's really cool to sit down with them and just be part of the help, if that makes sense.
So your optics on both the startup sort of scene, Geekdom's growth, the scene outside of Geekdom, the kind of convergence of some of the different industries. What's the common thread? This growth that's happening here, what's underlying it? Why is it happening, and do you see it continuing in this way or accelerating? Do a little prognosticating for us.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a really good way to define if something is a healthy environment or not, right? And like a healthy company, a healthy organization, healthy anything, and you can watch it as a person inside of it, and just watch what happens to somebody that I would call a quote-unquote bad actor. Somebody who's a negative person, somebody who's unhealthy and just negative to other people, doing destructive things. Like if you see that person, watch what happens to them in an organization, right? So if you look at them in a typical like governmental organization, they stay and multiply. If you look at them in a healthy organization, like they get the hell out, right? Like they find their way out really quick because they don't feel welcome, right? And the places I tend to gravitate towards personally, those negative people like work their way out very quickly. So, you know, I feel like Codeup is that type of place. I feel like Geekdom has become that kind of place. And that's the magic that I think is going on here, is that if you go talk to somebody that works at Rackspace right now, or you go talk to somebody that's considering San Antonio and they walk around Geekdom, they're like, this is the place I want to be, right? And, you know, I interview candidates all the time. And they're like, yeah, I went to SIP, and I saw some so-and-so there, and they were doing this, and they were doing that, and I walked over to Geekdom, and the energy was just amazing, and it just built on itself so people want to be here, right? And if you create that environment that matches people's energy and matches their personal like journey that they're on, like it's gonna be unstoppable. And you see us all, like all the Houston Street companies now, like so us, Grok, Turner Logic, Bullbrush, you see the guys that are on Broadway Street, FileStack and all those guys, like we're all like trying to stay within walking distance of where the center of that energy is, and it's this building. So like, dude, I don't see it stopping. I mean, I think with what's happening with San Antonio, like it's just not going anywhere. So, I don't know if that's prognosticating or not for you, but
I like it. I think that's
but everybody I know is like, wow, like that would be awesome. Like that would be great to be down there, and as long as we have that, it's gonna be pretty neat.
Well, I think there's a positivity and you know, something else is that feeling like you can show up here and you can make a difference. You can show up here and you can play a meaningful role in the transition and the growth of San Antonio, and you just don't have that, you know, places that are busier or bigger or however you want to define that thing. San Antonio has that, you know, feeling of opportunity. And I think this Houston Street thing is really interesting too.
I'm glad you like it. It's my idea.
It's perfect. Well done. Perfectly executed.
It's like, we gotta brand this. Everybody's on Houston Street, including me.
But it is. I mean, it's like, let's give a center of gravity. You know, so if the band building is a vertically organized, you know, community now, right, between here and the 110 Broadway, you know, the free trade, you've got, right, this, you know, horizontal sort of stretching of these companies, and that's a nice segue. So we're soon to be new neighbors with you. You're going to be opening the Entrepreneur Center there above Bohannon's. And you guys are now at the Vogue building, and so let's get an update. You know, you moved out to Geekdom, and how's the new spot working out, and when can we all come visit?
Whenever you want. No, but actually, yeah, you're welcome anytime you want to Codeup. So we're in the Vogue building, which is the corner of Navarro and Houston Street. It's an old like brick building, it's got like exposed brick in it. It's pretty cool. Like, I walk in there and I'm like, this is awesome. This is the place to be, and I think most people have that feeling. That's what we wanted to create there, is a place where like everybody wanted to be in that space, and I feel like our staff and everybody has it. And but I think a lot of people really discount how much space and the environment that you're in every day affects what the company culture is. And for us, like Codeup is a business about creating talent, nurturing talent, and you know the whole thing is a cycle of talent for us, right? And that talent. Oh, I'm dead.
My check.
You know, that talent wants to be in a environment that like corresponds to the level of that talent, right? You can't, you know, it's funny, I talked about, I go to this like CEO group, so it's like a monthly educational thing where we get together with other CEOs, and these guys are all baby boomers. And we talked about our business, and said, oh, yeah, Codeup needs to move to the suburbs. I was like, oh, really? And so they, and it was interesting feedback, but the feedback was, you should move to the suburbs so you can save on rent. And I said, but it's not what matters, right? What matters is we can spend a little bit more and get people that are super excited about being there. They'll be more productive, right? And that's why a place like the Vogue or Geekdom like really matters, because in our knowledge industries, if you can make somebody that's smarter act 20% harder, like you're going to get so much more utility out of that, right? Than if somebody's just stuck in a bunker on the side of the road between a McDonald's and a Burger King. Like that's not what the people who want to be down here want. And that's why for a long time we lost all the really, really smart people who were leaving San Antonio. Now we have them stay, which I think is fantastic. So.
Okay, so expand on that. No, you're good. I'll shout at the world, but so talent obviously, so the pillars that support a startup community, obviously human capital, and then we talked about already financial capital, but Codeup, you're obviously in the business of producing talent for the innovation economy, but tell me about, what are some of your experiences and the conversations you have with people who are contemplating moving to San Antonio? Is it a hard sell? Is it, as you say, it's made easier now by having some energy on Houston Street, but what is that conversation like? And let's dig in a little bit, like what's still missing, or what still needs some work to make that easier for you as a CEO?
Yeah, so I think the prospect of trying to import talent is like really, really hard. Like, I've seen people in our environment try to like import companies here. Like, oh, let's talk to this startup, and they're considering moving to Austin, Philadelphia, or here, or Boulder, and it's like, we never win that. Like, it's just because we don't have the massive talent that Austin or Boulder does yet. So I tried like 3 times, and I was like, I don't know why I'm trying this. Like, I'm gonna stop trying to recruit companies here. And I spend a lot more time trying to help people that are here, like think through their business and try to do a better job with it. What was the second part of your question?
Well, it's just, what are the challenges, some of them that still remain?
Oh, yeah.
How's the conversation go? You kind of touched on it. Moving a whole company when they're looking at other cities and they have means to go someplace else. What is it about San Antonio that doesn't yet support that? Why is that not easy?
Yeah, we don't have a mass, for tech in particular, like we don't have a mass of highly experienced people that have been part of startups for a long period of time, right? We're lucky to have Ami, who's our new VP of marketing, and who moved from San Francisco to here because she heard that San Antonio was the next big thing, and she's really good at predicting the next big thing.
So who tweeted that? Was it Darby? I wonder who. Yeah, like how? How did you hear that? That's what I want to know.
I heard it on NPR when I was traveling around the country. I was on a 22,000-mile trip around the country, and in NPR when I was on the West Coast and on the East Coast, I heard stories about San Antonio. So I was like, what is it about this place? It keeps following me.
Well, she's like a plant in the audience. Are there any other plants in the audience? Who will be answering my next question? There we go.
But I think it's really pretty interesting, right? And it's, hopefully folks like Ami are just kind of, forerunners of a massive migration of people that will be, really continue to help us change the city here. But San Antonio does not, everybody will tell you, San Antonio does not have people that have been VP of sales for a startup, tech startup. San Antonio does not have people that have been VP of engineering for a startup. San Antonio, and on down the list, right? And, I think the way to fix that is just patience, right? As we see companies like Par Level or our company grow, there will be people who spend time in senior level roles and do that. But I think the big gap that I see right now is I have the same mentor meeting with people over and over again. Over and over again. It's like, hey, here's my startup idea. Oh, great. Okay. How many customers have you talked to? None. Who is your customer? I don't know, but it's a great idea. What could go wrong? I'm actually, it's almost like we're to the point where we need a Codeup to teach people how to start a company. Right, and so Cafe Commerce has done that definitely for small business stuff like that, but startups are different.
Yeah.
And if you're going to try to create a company that grows pretty quickly, like you have to do it. So, foreshadowing for a product I'm working on. But
I think it's a good idea. So this San Antonio Entrepreneur Center, aiming at that a little bit. We are following the model from the Dallas Entrepreneur Center, again, a different market, but look at what's happening where they put 200 companies through that place in 2 years and became a bullseye for venture capital. What I think has been kind of a missing piece, and because of San Antonio's sort of nascent startup scene, is that the corporate community hasn't quite figured out how to interact with it yet. And there's a lot to be gained once we really, close that gap. And so you've been doing that again from a talent production standpoint with Codeup a little bit. But even there, have you found that rewiring, HR relationships, connecting universities with internship opportunities, like what are some of the pieces that you found exist? Like what's some of the infrastructure on supporting talent or even supporting small companies that you see in other places that we don't have here? Let's sort of seed this audience with ideas on things that are needed.
Yeah, I think in terms of a startup community, you look at what more progressive institutions like SRI, Stanford Research Institute, like in Palo Alto has done. It's a quasi part of Stanford, right? And they have from the beginning looked at how can we like commercialize the things, the IP that we come up with and developments we come up with. And the reason I say this is because like we have an amazing resource in San Antonio that nobody ever talks about and is actually a huge opportunity lost, and it's Southwest Research, right? Like those guys are generating IP all the time, but they have gone a different direction from SRI, right? They actually have, as part of their board of directors, said we don't care about startups. Like we're not gonna license this stuff. Like we're just a government contractor, right? And it's actually a huge sad thing, right? Whereas you have UTSA and these guys trying to discover things and commercialize it. Like you have Southwest Research 30 years ago, like right when DataPoint was here and stuff like that. Southwest Research could have been taking all that IP they were creating and turning that into startups and spinning it out, right? And it's just a provincial mindset that we have a lot of times from top to bottom. That kind of stuff, like that adds up. And anyway, that was a rant. I don't know how I got on that, but it just makes me sad. I have like 6 standard rants. My staff's heard all of them. So if we
let's get one more. While you're.
I don't know. You got. I need the appropriate segment. But yeah, I think Codeup exists because higher education institutions have totally punted on saying we are in the job preparation business, and I think if you were going to take $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 from people and promise them a future, which you look at all the marketing from the local universities, they all say that. I think if you're going to take that money and sleep at night, you should actually give somebody a future, and that's a liberal arts education that gives you a basis of a bunch of different stuff and some job skills that actually matter. And if you look, an interesting chart you can all go look at what the community college degrees that are being sold by our local community colleges. And I say that because they're in the education business, right? Codeup is in the jobs business. We're in the futures business, and that's how we measure ourselves. This is rant number 2. Thank you. Okay. But if you go look at degrees being sold by the community colleges, right? And go look at, they have a chart which is really telling. And on one column is here are the number of degrees we sell by quantity, okay? And it's general whatever, psychology, just stuff that, that stuff that we all have a friend with a degree that you're like, that guy's screwed, right? They sell a ton of those degrees, right? And then you go look and they say, here's what they make when they leave.
But he's a great barista.
Yeah. But nursing, right? And petroleum engineering, that's how you can get paid coming out of a community college. Easy peasy. You want to spend 2 years of your life, go be set for life, become a petroleum engineer. Like you can do that at community college. Straightforward. The issue is they don't push people towards those degrees that actually give them a future to move up, right? They sell the degrees they can, right? And I think that's just totally sad, right? Go read their marketing. Like this is what they're promising. Hey, we'll give you a future. And I think higher education is amazing. It's just horribly implemented. And so on one hand, I'm like super happy that it's horribly implemented because like the kids do Codeup. But I understand the scale that these things are horribly implemented at the local colleges is just, it's bad.
Well, and unfortunately it starts before that. So our 12-year-old just took the SAT, and as it happens, her reading comprehension score is higher than 72% of all graduating seniors in the United States. So I was like, oh, that's not good. It's not, yay, my daughter's great. It's, oh, we're fucked. This is not a celebratory revelation. Oh, beep. Sorry, excuse me. Well, he said he wasn't going to curse, so somebody's got to. It's like, what are we doing here? But I think, well, this is your show. I shouldn't be ranting.
No.
Okay, so
that way no one will remember my rant.
Okay, I want to ask you a deep and meaningful question. What would that be?
What should
yeah, what would my deep and meaningful question? If I were to ask you a deep and meaningful question right now.
I was going to make a boxers or briefs jokes, but nobody here remembers they were all too young. So that's the fun part about like being the oldest person in my company is I make jokes that relate to like old stuff, like from the 90s.
Like Ghostbusters.
And everybody's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like,
hey, have you heard about this movie?
I'm like, let me tell you about this quote from Fight Club. It was fantastic. They're like, what's Fight Club? No idea. Anyway, continue.
David Bowie? Okay, so pick a deep and meaningful question that you've always been dying to answer and no one ever had the balls to ask, and pretend I just asked it. You can just ask it in the form of the question. How about that? What's the best question you'd like to be asked?
Man, I think talking about imposter syndrome is pretty cool.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Do it.
Do you guys know what imposter syndrome is? You guys know what it is? Okay, so imposter syndrome, you know when you walk in, you're like, I don't belong here, I'm underqualified, I can't do this. You know what I'm talking about? That little voice, that's the imposter syndrome, right? It's telling you like, hey, you can't do this, you're screwed, right? So, I think number one thing to learn as an adult, like, is, like, you have to take that little thing and be like, yep, I'm good enough, like, I can do this, like, and just ignore that voice, right? Because those people that can control their emotions and control those little voices that are pushing you back and holding you back, like, darn it, you belong, like, you can do this. And so I think that's, like, I see so many people with it. And, you know, I talk to a lot of female entrepreneurs, it's something like I try to coach them out of, like, darn it, you're good, like, you can do this, like, your confidence is there. And, you know, this is, unfortunately, tech is a very male-dominated environment. I have the distinct pleasure of getting to work in a female-dominated environment because I seem to keep hiring them. And they're great. But it's just like, I think we all have it, and it's all something like, I see it in people, and I'm like, I'm trying to shake them out of it. Like, you're good enough, you can do this. You have 50 employees, you're making a lot of money, it's great. And anyway, I just want to talk about that.
Well, that's a good one, and I think the other point, and you said it, is that everyone has that voice. It's just how loudly you hear it, and whether or not you believe it.
Yeah, you gotta ignore it.
I love that, you know, in the 4 agreements, so we'll get touchy-feely here, thank you, but it's that, you know, any story that you hear told about yourself by someone else, you don't have to believe, we all know that. But it's also true that a story you tell yourself, you don't have to believe that one either. So the voice is just a little voice, and you can either believe it or not believe it, and, you know, but you've got to decide what it is you want to do. You mentor a lot of different people through a lot of different programs. Maybe give us you know, Techstars, you've helped Breakfast and Launch, big culinary program. Obviously, you know, through the fund, you're mentoring companies. You mentor the students that are coming through Codeup. Are there other places where you're investing time, or maybe there are other organizations that we should all know about, or programs that this audience should know about where they might invest time also?
Well, so I try to donate a lot of my time, and like I started to get involved in things, different programs and stuff that wasn't around creating this mission of creating like a startup community in San Antonio. And so I learned pretty quickly, and you know, now I'm at a stage in life where I get invited to galas and stuff like that. Like, you know, you got to wear a suit, and they do a lot of speeches and stuff. Crystal Darby's shaking her head. You've probably been invited to a few of those. Like, they're awful. And like,
Says the man of the year of 2014. You can't talk like that. You're a fancy dude. Come on, man.
But like, so I think it's important to think about, for me, was to think about like what gives me joy, like on a day-to-day basis. And I would go to these galas, I would get involved in these organizations that weren't around that thing that really struck me, right? And it gave me no joy. Like get involved in civic stuff, like I was like, this is terrible. Like, I have no interest in this. Like, nobody does anything, you can't make any decisions. Like, and so I realized like bottom-up change around this one mission was like what really mattered to me. And I think a lot of people go and get involved in civic stuff, and I did this when I was younger, and get asked to get involved in something, and next thing you know, you're helping something you don't even really care about, you know, save the pigeons or whatever. Like, nobody, if that's not passionate for you, like, you shouldn't do it. But for me, like, finding that narrow thing and giving my time to that and saying, like, okay, I'm just saying no to everything else, like, it was totally liberating. And it's actually kind of fun, like, to explain that to people who come asking for money or donations or time. You're just like, nope, I don't care about this. Like, it's not my thing. In a nice way, you just say it in a really nice way. And so last week we got an email like that, and then so this development person asked me, and I'm like, well, no, this is my rubric, I'm not interested in what you're doing, I'm sorry, sounds great, have fun with that. And they emailed me back like, well, what about your wife? Are we her thing? I was like, no, you're not her thing either, sorry, I was just hyper-focused. But like, I think it's an amazing like chance to do that. So yeah, so basically I don't really do anything else civic-wise other than, you know, if you're in San Antonio and you want to start a company, like I will do things for you just because you're here. I will connect you to people, I will try to help you with talent, I won't ask for anything. I might try to throw money at you if you're really fantastic and have a great idea. Most times I won't, I will tell you no and make you feel bad about it, and then hopefully you can make it better.
What should people do? Should they tweet at you or email you or?
Oh yeah, I have like you can book time with me and just come over. Like, it's pretty easy. There's like on my website.
Just find you at SIP and just stalk you.
I don't go to SIP as much as I used to.
Right.
Yeah, no, I've started going to Starbucks. I'm really sorry. It's a long story. I kind of complained about the service at SIP once, and the staff found out. And anyway, so now I'm kind of scared scared to go there.
I think we should all go together afterwards and help heal this void. Or you'll
There was a guy who kept sitting in a really good seat, and I wanted to sit there when I was I emailed the owner, and I was like, dude, I want to sit there. And anyway, so I think he told the staff. I don't know why I'm telling this. But anyway, everybody's like, why don't you go to sip? I'm like, oh, I'm scared. I'm worried they're going to do something to my coffee.
Please, no more. Okay, and on that note, what do we say we opened it up to some questions from the floor?
Ooh, this is the fun part.
Yeah.
So when Matthew and I met, and by the way, can we just give a shout out to Matthew Espinosa in the back? Like, so how many of you at 21 who hadn't graduated college yet were putting on events like this? Like, and had the gumption to go and like ask people to do it? Like, at 21, I wouldn't even talk to 40-year-olds. Like, I wouldn't even talk to my parents. I was so scared. So like, it's awesome that Matthew's doing this, and we've had a huge problem in this community where it's like the same 7 chumps, like organizing events over and over again. So it's fantastic. Like, he feels comfortable enough here and
That there's
welcome
an
up here.
8th chump.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. I came out wrong.
There should be another 8, you chump. Anyway, but when we met, I was like, dude, we should just make the whole thing Q&A. It'd be so awesome. And so I felt so bad for Matthew in retrospect because I was like, oh, I'm this old guy in my office, like talking over him and browbeating him. And I think it's turned out fantastic. So I'm sorry for being a jerk to you when we met.
Apology accepted. Well, there's a question. Yes, sir.
Oh,
You
hey,
in the Startup Grind T-shirt.
So, I just like to hear this. What's the worst idea you've heard?
That's a great question.
Oh, man. Well, we did. This was not said seriously, but I will tell you this pitch.
Wait, that wasn't Ryan's. Maybe we should have, yeah.
So I was hanging out with some of the Techstars people once, and we're like, okay, everybody, let's see who can throw out the worst startup idea in the next 10 minutes. And so this came from a guy who, by the way, was from Boston, and I convinced him about 5 minutes earlier that somebody had built a full-size replica of King's Landing out by Hondo. And he's like, when can we go? It was such a Game of Thrones person. So I was like, how long can I keep this going? Like, I think I could convince him that there's a full-size replica of King's Landing out there. There's no water behind it.
There's a Stonehenge.
Stonehenge out there?
Yeah.
So anyway, so this startup idea is called Refloss, right? And basically it's a floss recycling business. So after you're done with your floss, you keep it and you put it in an envelope and you mail it to Refloss. And then the fun thing about Refloss is they take the chunks off of it and then they use that as food. So that was disgusting, but it won for the worst startup idea. I don't know, most startup ideas when people come, they're not really, most people don't have like that business model muscle in their brain. They haven't turned it on. Like nobody really teaches it to you, for generations. School is designed really to make you a follower. Right? MBA, all that stuff, it makes you a fantastic follower, right? But it doesn't teach you how to go out and trailblaze stuff because the people who originally funded the school systems, they didn't really care about creating work for them, right? The Carnegies and those guys, like none of those guys have MBAs. Like that's the fun thing about, you go look at all the business schools, like look at the names on the business schools and look at how many people those actually have MBAs.
Or even degrees at all.
Or even degrees, yeah. So it's actually pretty interesting. But none of that stuff gets taught in school because the people that set up those systems who wanted you to come work for them never really had an incentive to teach you that stuff. So a lot of times we just spend talking about how you think about business. Like, would you rather, I hear and talk to a lot of people, they're like, yeah, I have this great idea, I'm going to sell it to HEB. Okay, that sounds good. HEB, big company. Grocers are notoriously bad customers, actually. They're very low margin, they don't want to spend money on anything, so it's actually pretty hard to get a lot of money out of HEB. Or they're interested in going to make a business that sells to 19-year-olds. That's okay. What do you guys think the problem with 19-year-olds is?
They don't have money.
Yeah, most of them are broke, right? I'm like, you should go sell something to my dad. Like go find somebody with no kids who's like got a life of, that's on the tail end, and they just want to enjoy it, right? Like so there's a lot of just kind of fundamental things like that. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say something stupid? Yeah, my wife was like, take a breath before you talk each time. That way you won't say anything offensive. I was like, you got it, dear. But yeah, so like a lot of people just have never exercised those muscles and kind of been thoughtful about it, and that's where like I think people who've been there before, me, the other Geekdom Fund partners, people like Peter that have been around for a while, we can be like, hey, think about this. You want to sell to somebody who makes $100,000 a year and not 1,000. Long-winded answer. Anybody else want to rant? I got one for you. Yes, Steve.
So, one of the big things that you taught myself personally, right, because, we've kind of gone through this over the past couple of years, it's been nice to see the startup ecosystem mature here in town. What are some things that you're seeing now with the startups here in town and ones that may have an interest in coming in terms of what they're doing to differentiate themselves? And shameless plug, if you're looking for an office next to Girdley and Grok and Turner Logic, check out spaces.io. The office that he has available is available for you guys, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I think one way to think about it is when you start your own company and bootstrap it. Are you guys familiar with what bootstrapping is? Okay, bootstrapping is when you don't take outside investment. It's like your own money, you lift yourself up by your bootstraps. What you're doing and all that stuff, and there's this idea that people have that when you're an entrepreneur, like you're this big risk taker, right? Like you're gonna hit a home run, you're gonna invest all this money, roll the dice, and it's make or break. And you hear those stories, and they're outliers, right? The reality is, you look at somebody like Graham, who by the way is a hero of a human being, like the greatest. I've spent time with a lot of great people. He's an amazing person, like Graham Weston. So it's fantastic. But anyway, you look at what he did with Rackspace, and it was a bunch of little tiny like experiments, like little shots. Like, okay, well, let's try this. Let's see how it goes. Okay, let's try this bigger thing and see how it goes. And that's what entrepreneurship really is. So when you're going to an investor, or you're going to yourself as an investor who's going to invest in your own startup, like what you're trying to do is de-risk that as much as possible, right? You're trying to make the whole world be your laboratory, right? And run little experiments and say, does this work? Do people actually care? Does anybody want to buy what I have? Does anybody want to pay what I have, what I'm building? Am I selling to them the right way? Am I pricing it the right way? All of that are experiments, right? And we did that in Codeup, I think. Like all the time we're looking and saying, here's an experiment, like should we raise the price? Should we lower the price? Should we give away for free? Should we charge people a percentage of their income after they leave? Like those are all experiments we ran very quietly, and we narrowed down to something that actually really works. So to come back to your question, right, the thing that you can do as a startup is go and differentiate yourself by taking those risks and checking off boxes, right? So we got pitched as a fund by a company that's doing just-in-time furniture manufacturing, right? So imagine you go into the mall next to the Apple store and there's a little kiosk there, and you click a button and you say, I want that couch, and it shows up at your house 36 hours later. Like for those of you that have bought a couch, like it's pretty revolutionary, because normally you have to wait 6 to 8 weeks for a couch to store from North Carolina. It's usually the wrong size. It has to be even multiples of this stuff and that stuff. But what that guy did, which was really smart, is he went in and he said, okay, I have a bunch of ifs in this. First of all, can I deliver a good couch in 24 hours? Like that's a big if, right? Second, can I sell it to anybody? Right? So what he did very first thing is he went and said, I'm gonna take this one issue off the table, and I'm gonna prove to everybody I can deliver a couch in 24 hours. Right? And he hired 6 people in LA, and he's got a little factory, and he spits out couches. Okay? Pretty cool in that way. But like the way you can differentiate yourself as a startup, both for you wanting to wake up every day and continue on it, and for other people wanting to consider investing in it, is starting to de-risk it in that way, right? You just check off stuff, right? So we didn't really talk about it. Like the Codeup founding story, I think is in line with that, okay? So when we first got together, me, Jason, and Chris, and said, hey, we're gonna start a coding boot camp, and it'd been done in 7 or 8 other places at the time, so we were iterating on that idea and copying it, trying to make it better. The first thing we did get together, and I'm with 2 engineers who love tech, and they're like, okay, we'll go write some curriculum. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't go write any curriculum. Don't go do any of that, right? Let me go see if anybody actually cares about this, right? So we went and my staff likes to call me the chief hand waver. Like I went and we did a lot of selling just from a little office where I was like, it's gonna be great, it's gonna be here. No, I'm not sure where the classroom is. No way I'm running any curriculum. No, it's gonna be great, I promise. And we set a goal and said, can I get 15 people to say that they want to sign up for this class before we did anything? And we waited until we wrote the curriculum, until we hired anybody, Ben, Isaac, any of these guys that have been with us from the beginning. And so we went and de-risked that, right? So instead of spending $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 on, let me go build this thing and see if anybody gives a hoot, right? We went and said, okay, here's this idea, do you care, right? And it really was that checking off of stuff to where we had a limit on the risk we were making at that point, right? So that's how you can differentiate yourself, is like just methodically check off the boxes until you walk into somebody's office and you say, yeah, totally de-risk. Look at all this thing, it's all put together, it's in a package with a bow on it.
I'm not the arbiter of time here, but it's 7:55. I think that sounds like a pretty sweet way
How about one more?
to roll this out. We got one more? Okay, let's do
Have
it.
you considered doing a startup weekend event here?
There is a group that has put one on. There's also 3-Day Startup, which is sponsored by Geekdom, which is kind of a similar model. So, yeah.
And Startup Week, there'll be the first Startup Week coming February, mid-February.
Different deal. Different model.
Yeah, 3-Day Startup is pretty awesome. Give it a thought.
Okay.
Yeah, I've done it. I've done it as a participant, and then I've facilitated a couple of programs, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Will Codeup actually add curriculum as far as the LAMP stack? I know that there's other competitors that are adding, mobile, or focus on mobile and .NET and whatnot. What are your thoughts about that as far as adding?
Yeah. So the way we think about what we do is it's kind of like if you think about speech, right, or a language like Spanish. So fundamentally, you teach yourself how to talk, right? What a word is, how words are put together, how there's pauses, how you interface with somebody else. And for us, like, we don't see ourselves as teaching you Spanish. Like, that's not the business we're in. We're in the business of teaching you how to become a coder, right? And so the belief that we have is we could teach you .NET as the teaching language, we could teach you Python, we could teach you all that stuff.
Right.
But the insight that we've gotten from a lot of mentor meetings and watching our graduates as they've left is what matters is, can you think like a coder? Because a great person in one grade stack, they can migrate over, right? You still know JavaScript, you still know HTML, CSS, you still know stuff. So anybody that I think is trying to sell you of, I'm going to make you an amazing iOS developer, should be really talking to you about how they're going to make you an amazing developer. And that's where we see our stuff going. But yeah, I mean, it would be nice someday to use a different teaching language as the methodology to teach stuff that, just like computer science programs have changed out Java for Python, right, and stuff like that. So, but ultimately what matters is, can you think like a developer? Do you have a network of other developers? Do you have a job that matters? Like, that's the thing we're really focused on. And really, our course is a lot more JavaScript than people think. That's the other thing to think about. So I don't know, that's the way we think about it. I think it's a more long-term way of thinking about a development career than, hey, here's Ruby on Rails. You can have fun with it for 6 weeks and then see what happens. Cool. So anyway, be happy to talk to you about it, or more if you do. So.
Any?
Ortega.
All right.
Is there any advice that you gave in the past that now you no longer agree with?
Yeah, I think I used to be much more in the you could skip college and go to Codeup and do that instead. I think that was something that as I've watched people leave us, and I've watched the people come in who didn't do college or didn't go spend some time in a job before doing Codeup, like I've seen them not launch as quickly as other people. So I guess it's a politically correct way of saying that. But they've had a harder time acclimating to the workforce. They've had all that stuff just not being there that you get with that level of maturity that happens over 4 years. So I think I wish higher education was just done a lot better than it is now. Like I think a lot of the model that we have is a 17th century English gentleman model where it was like cool to take 4 months off in the summer, right? And then it's also kind of arbitrary that we try to study 6 things at once for 3 months, and then you try to study 6 things again. Like a lot of that just doesn't really make sense. That's not the way life is, right? You don't work on 6 things at once for 3 months, right? As a developer, you work on one thing for 3 months, and then it goes on. So, but anyway, like that, I think that's something that I've watched, and I think is different now. I encourage people, like, you should go to college. Like, it's a good place to be if you want to be a knowledge worker. And college is not for everybody, but like, it's a good place to be. So.
Why do you think entrepreneurs struggle most? Why do you think they struggle? Maybe the top 2 reasons or 3 reasons.
Yeah. I mean, I think the number one curse for entrepreneurs is you build something people don't want. Right? So, a lot of times when we meet with people, we ask like, how'd the story come around? How did your business come? How'd you get this idea? I'm sorry, Matthew, do we need to finish? Yeah, so we'll ask you like, oh, how'd you get the idea for this? And what we're listening for is, man, I have this huge itch and I'm dying to build a company to scratch it. That is a fantastic answer, because guess what we know at that point? One person gives a shit. Like that, there's at least a proof that one person cares. So that's really the number one thing. Like, I see entrepreneurs secondarily making a huge mistake to not price their product for what kind of value it's really bringing. Like the number of mentor meetings I've had where somebody's like, I want to give it away for free. Like, oh my God, don't give your product away for free. Like, you know, there's a few businesses where that works, but a lot of businesses, these people are like, oh, I think I should price it for $2 and a bag of Doritos. And I was like, dude, that's a really good, you know, it doesn't work. And that's something we learned really at Codeup, right, is we see what we're doing as providing a premier level of education, right? We are investing tons in the students. We have low student to teacher ratio, beautiful facility, work really hard on the curriculum. Like, we have tons of people working on placement for people. And early on, like, we were pricing it at a level that was creating a mental pathway for the customer that they didn't understand. They're like, wait, you're selling me a Mercedes for like $10,000? Like, I don't understand. Like that math just doesn't work. You have to have a consistent story that if you're gonna provide a quality product for people, you have to make them pay for it. And that's just the nature of America. Otherwise they stop. They're like, wait a second, what's wrong with this thing?
So not even compromise at the beginning.
So compromising at the beginning to get proof points is a really good idea,
Okay.
right? But you give those people a discount. Let's say you think your product is worth $500, give that first adopter a 50% discount for taking a bet on your thing that nobody else has ever used. But still, you need to price it at what it matters, right? Because it's much better if you can do the math, and there's some interesting stuff online where you look at, okay, let's say you want to get your company to $1 million, like how hard is it to do that with a $1 per product selling price, and how hard is it to do it with $1,000 per product selling price? Like, one requires 1 million customers, the other requires 10,000 customers. Like, totally different order of magnitude in how you approach stuff. So like, you know, you really got to think about how you are going to be on that curve, like the supply demand curve. Right?
Awesome.
One more, Matt? It's all right.
If there's one more,
Yes, ma'am.
If, knowing where you were and where you are now in that journey, do you have any regrets or things that you would do differently?
Yes.
What are those?
I was scared of, this is where I have to have a pause to counter myself. I went through a lot of my youth and my 20s really super worried about what people would think of me. And that you learn is like a really negative thought cycle, right? If you start to base who you are and how you value yourself on what other people think of you, or do you get awards, do you get put up on the stage or whatever, like that's a cycle of despair, right? That's just how you feel terrible, right? Because there's always gonna be greener grass someplace else. And once I stopped really worrying about that stuff, or stopped caring that, whether I was a failure or not, like it doesn't matter anymore. You know, you just say I don't care. And so that kept me from taking risks that, I wish I was more like me 10 years ago. You know, I wish I could go back to that person and be like, you're an idiot. Like go out there and be more gregarious at parties, and like don't be afraid if somebody doesn't like you. Like who cares? Like, and then the funny stuff about that is kind of like when I was a senior in high school. Like I used to struggle to be in the top 10% of the class, and like it was always hard. Because there's always the kid that was smarter, and I was always wanted to be them. And then senior in high school, I just said, forget it. I don't care anymore. Whatever grades I get. And I remember having like arguments with the English teacher. Like she'd be like, why are you sleeping in my class? And I'd be like, look, if I listen to what you're saying and then I write a paper about that, you give me a B. If I sit here, I go to sleep, and I think of my own creative idea and I write it for you, give me an A. And she said, I can't argue with that. And I went back to sleep, right? And so it's kind of like that. Like a lot of life, you get held back if you care too much.
Oh man.
And so I wish I could go back to Michael in 2004. Just relax. Nobody really cares. It's not that big a deal. Nobody cares. And I think that's a good life lesson for everybody. It's just like nobody gives a shit. Like there's 5 billion people on the planet. None of us are very important. It's so liberating. Man. It's like so liberating when you're like, yeah, nobody cares about me. On that depressing note.
That is a
I was thinking about talking about dog tags.
Let's give one more.